loves to watch. She loves to watch. As the house plays havoc, little girl's heart. She watches Mr. Silver Berkeley got the clothes in the dark.
Hi, I'm Art Fein. This is a Little Art's Poker Party, a very special edition, coming to you from Santa Monica. We got a couple of the regular guys in and a very extraordinary guest. Extraordinary guest first. We'll do this in descending order. We'll start at the top. We got Dion. one name's enough, Dion, but Dion DiMucci, a fine fella, a great musician, and a guy who's got this book out right now called The Wanderer, written by him and a friend of ours, Davin C., who couldn't make it today because he's out in New York. But this is a real fascinating book. I've read it, all about the life and times of Dion with and without the Belmonts, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Next to him we got Bill Leibowitz. Bill, didn't I see you on this show 4 years ago?
That's it, Art. I'm a regular.
Just can't keep you away.
That's it. Once
Bill,
you get the showbiz in your blood.
Bill, do you happen to have a jacket with the name of your store on it by any chance?
Non-commercial TV.
Okay, forget it then. He runs a store on Melrose. He's a comic book maven and a doo-wop guy too.
Right.
And he's a cool guy, and he's here to talk to Dion. Same thing for Paul Bodie. Paul?
Yeah.
You're a Dion fan.
Yeah, I told you, man. I told you I wanted
You flipped.
to show.
You
I
said-
flipped. I said, I got to be here.
Yeah, and here you are.
Here I am.
This kind of looks like an impact of a bullet right here. I mean,
Right.
this
This
splatter.
thing.
What
Well,
is that thing?
It's a mariachi tie that
Yeah.
guys in mariachi bands.
Yeah.
See, I was going to get a whole outfit made.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Are you still working on that?
Oh yeah, sure. But I just got the tie because
Well, you're
I was tapped. So let's get the tie.
Well, you're always the fashion plate of this show. That's why we call you. Yeah, glad to see you. So Dion, we want to talk about lots of stuff, and we got a lot of detailed information, but the book's doing well. How long's it been out? It's in the fall of '88?
Couple of weeks.
Okay, so we can't tell yet. Well, it's got so much early information that we're interested in. Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you for a second because I'm going to have to collect my thoughts, but you get into a lot of real dicey things in here and how you've lived through a lot of difficult time, like with this heroin business. I don't want to start off with this because it's not the theme of the book, but that's what I'm thinking of right now.
Part of it, yeah.
Yeah. And in the early days, when you're messing around with that stuff as a child, for Christ's sake, were you unique, you think, among teenage performers of that period? I mean, because that is it seems awfully severe. I'm not saying was everybody else doing it, but I mean, kids would mess around with grass or something like that, and you were really over the edge pretty soon. Is that from the other guys you met in that period? Would you say that that was a pretty extreme move on your part, or you did?
Yeah, it was. Like you're talking about 1955, and heroin wasn't really like prevalent, you know. Came into the neighborhood. I was part of a gang. I wasn't into music. I mean, I was into music, but I wasn't into a career.
Uh-huh.
And I guess I don't know, man. I come from a real dysfunctional family, and there was a lot of craziness in the family, and a lot of, I guess, very repressive emotionally. And then that whole Italian macho tradition, you know, you don't show your feelings. So on top of that, and having 250 Italian relatives that all talked at once, nobody listened. But you know, they were scared to death of feelings. If you ever talked about how you felt, I had uncles that would slap you around, man. They say, don't tell anybody how you feel. You know, they'll get to know what's going on. You know what I mean? That's the way it was. So it was like, don't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. It's crazy to feel that way. It's wrong to feel that way. Don't show that. So I think when I picked up this drug at the age of like 14, 15, I was like a time bomb ready to go off. All I know is like, I had a lot of doubts, and you know, just like any teenager, you know, you got these insecurities and stuff. Pick up a drug, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not stopping you. I was just thinking that I just pitched it wrong, because I was saying you in the musical context, when in fact that stuff preceded your musical career. So you probably came in like pretty bonkers right off the bat.
Well, what happened was I picked up this drug. Man, I remember it so clearly, because I walked out of this basement that we were in. You know, we snorted some of this stuff, and man, the world took on a new glow to me. I just found a courage, a confidence that I never had, man. I walked up Crotone Avenue, the center line in the middle of the street. I walked into the corner candy store, and it was like, the kid is here. I mean, you fortunate people, I'm here. This is what you were waiting for. It was like, I was like on a, and I felt good. I felt like I couldn't say anything wrong. I walked up to the girl that I had my eye on, man, I could talk a thing. And that's why I kept doing it, because I felt good. And then what happens is I just, you know, what I get into in the book is, I mean, it takes a while, but when I stopped, I felt bad. So, you know, I started because it felt good, and that's as simple as it was. It was like hell at the end of this thing.
Speaking of, we have the older Laurie albums up on the wall. I'm reminded of this one particular album. I don't know, I mean, you don't look too good on this one. Were you feeling bad that day?
I think so. Yeah, that you're looking at an album there that happened in a period of my life that was the most, it was like a real bleak period of my life.
I don't mean to be waving all this kind of stuff in front of your face.
Please. You're cruel.
And then we got the Abraham Martin and John period from '68. Well, it took me a couple years after owning that record to flip it over and hear. Great. What's that?
What?
I love it.
What was on it?
Oh, Daddy Rollin'.
Daddy Rollin'.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know, let me just tell you a little about Abraham and John, how that came about. I was, we were talking about heroin and addiction. It kind of, I hit a bottom in 1968. I was like, first of all, I was working quietly on the guitar back in the mid-'60s because that folk movement had come into Greenwich Village, you know, all the Lightning Hopkins and Mississippi John Hurt. And they all had finger picks and play at these clubs, and I love this kind of music, you know. Now, I would breathe down Lightning Hopkins, I would be right on his right shoulder, man, looking at what he was doing, you know. And so I was doing all that, and I was using drugs, and it got real bad. And in '68, I just had hit a real bottom, and I asked for help, and I come through that heroin thing. I haven't had a drug or a drink since 1968, but what happened was, about 3 months after I cleaned up, I recorded Abraham, Martin, and John. I did this album at that period in my life. It was just a real turnaround for me.
So was in that turnaround period of getting clean, then the Daddy Rollin' resulted in that same session period, or was that over?
Well, you know how that happened. There was a small studio in Miami, and it was behind a bowling alley. There was a bunch of Caribbean musicians, and just a whole bunch of guys used to hang around there. So we got in there, we were banging on cardboard boxes, and I made this song up. It might have been a mile from my home in Miami, but I just had this tape. It had nothing to do with the album. So they kind of stuck it on the back of Abraham, Martin, and John before I recorded the album. See, I just recorded the single. It had nothing to put on the back, so I said, I got this tape I did in the bowling alley, you know, and
I play that for people all the
it
time.
sounds it.
It sounds great. I play it for people all the time and say, guess who this is? And nobody can get it, and they always flip because it's such a great tune.
Yeah.
Just you jump in, because I'm just going to keep going, and I know you got a lot.
Well, how did you come to do Hoochie Coochie Man? Because the first time I heard, I guess, was that like the follow-up to Ruby Baby or something like that? Or was that the same time?
Well, you know,
I was shocked when I heard it. Because, I mean, here was this kid. I was a suburban kid. I never heard anything like that.
You learned the blues from Dion?
Yeah, really. And I said, wow, listen to this. So I'd never heard it before.
Well, you know, all this is based in black music. I mean, you know, there was a guy in my neighborhood, his name was Willie. He was the janitor in one of these apartment buildings, and he played guitar. And he used to play Chuck Berry tunes, like, he would show me tunes like, I was motivating back in town. I saw a Cadillac sign saying, he used to play like that. And I said, I need that other pick. But he used to play like rock and roll music. Like, I guess he cut his teeth on Robert Johnson and Lightning Hopkins and all that stuff. So he used to play rock and roll on the stoops in Bronx, New York City. But I learned like a lot of this kind of guitar playing from him, and I kind of got based on it, but I never knew it existed. I thought he was like an original. He didn't have any of these albums or anything. So then later on, I started, when I went to Columbia,
Columbia Records.
Columbia, yeah.
I mean,
When you get this old, you get the file that's good.
I mean, it's not by, you know, Paraguay.
No, the restaurant.
Yeah, okay.
I went to Columbia Records. I was with them in the early 60s, and John Hammond Sr., who brought Dylan and Springsteen
And
to
Robert
Columbia.
Johnson.
Yeah, Robert Johnson.
Yeah. He played me some of these records because he heard me next door. He says, Dion, he says, you playing this stuff like the Bronx Blues or something. He says, you got a real flair for the blues. He says, you want to hear some stuff? I said, yeah, I didn't know this guy. So I walked in his office, and he pulled out records like Furry Lewis and Mississippi John Hurt, and he blew my mind. I said, where did you get this stuff? I was like mad. I was excited, but I was angry. Like I was resentful. Like, who's been hiding this stuff from me?
Yeah,
You know, you had no right. You know, this has been around. What?
Yeah, I felt that way.
You know, I was like, man. I came home. My wife's sitting here. Just to tell you, I came home with a
Stack of Columbia Records.
you know, I had a stack of like albums on them, and I just kind of went into the woodshed for like a year.
But you
just
listened
listening
to Hank Williams earlier on when you
Yeah,
were a kid.
that's
Like
true.
on your first album, even though I wonder why it was like the all-time doo-wop group thing, there was like country stuff on there.
Yeah.
And like an attempt at blues, there was some other, you know, there was almost some guitar stuff on there.
Yeah, it's funny. See, I come from a time where like there was no rock and roll. They had like the race music. I mean, I think Alan Freed started playing Ruth Brown and who is it? Laverne Baker. You know, that's the first stuff I remember hearing. But like there was no rock and roll, and then all of a sudden it started to, you know, perk, you know, in the neighborhood. So I come out of this Hank Williams tradition where I hear stuff like, yeah, I left my home down on the rural route. Told my pa I was gonna step out and lead this honky-tonk blues. Yeah, them honky-tonk blues. Well, Lord, I got them. So I said, so then you start hearing this, you know, the horn parts. So when I started making the music, you couldn't conjure up, you know, I didn't know any horn sections or anything, so we were hearing horn parts. I'd get the guys on the corner, and we would sing the or like, I was a girl and the ruby is her name. So instead of doing the horn parts, they sing Ruby, 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 baby. We were hearing horns, so we.
Well, that's like the tradition of doo-wop. You didn't have the instruments, and
Right.
so you did it with vocals.
So that's how we did. Yeah.
The thing that got me, one
So
of the
it's
things,
kind of like rock and roll, doo-wop country music.
right.
You know what I mean? That's the kind of stuff that, with an Italian expression.
Don't forget the Yiddish part too, from Little
That's right.
Diane.
Little Diane, the
right,
Jewish rock and roll.
Because in the book he talks about the fact that Little Diane has a cantor kind of intonation to it,
Yeah, we throw everything in, yeah.
and that also parallels Cab Calloway, who did the same
Yeah,
thing.
it does have a Hasidic kind of quality to
Well,
it.
the one that really has the cantor, and I don't know what key I did this in, but that
Born to Cry.
Born to Cry.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like a real come out
Now
of
I know
synagogue.
why I like that.
I said,
Jewish
same,
rock and roll.
Same thing. I'm really fixed on that record. Maybe that's why. Yeah.
Yeah. See, today they would call that fusion, but it was Jewish rock and roll. So.
But I always, you know, it seemed like in the first album there was these different kind of styles. It was always there. There was the country stuff, and that's always come along. And I've had the feeling that you were always searching for a kind of style where you could express the roots things. This idea of hearing horns and playing vocal parts on the guitar. and that you haven't really been comfortable until like the Warner Brothers stuff. The Warner Brothers stuff, I felt.
Nah, you want to know? I'm comfortable now.
Well, but I mean, it's the stuff where you were doing the guitars and things, that's led to where you are now.
Yeah. I don't know, the 60s to me, the 70s was like the Warner Brothers albums were almost like a real diary. They were almost like therapy for me, trying to get stuff out, that I was feeling outside. Well, music has always been, there's always been that, it's always been a way out for me, because again, with the feelings as a kid, you find it hard to express yourself. Music was that place where I could be honest, and really get it out.
One song that you did on Warner Brothers, I always bought Dion albums because I love Dion and the Belmonts and all this, but when you did Sanctuary on Warner Brothers, I sat and listened to that song all the time, and I said, this guy is like explaining what he's going through right now.
Yeah,
and there's something that came through that was an honest emotion that almost transcended the music, and it was a very simple kind of guitar thing, but it really made a connection. That whole, the idea of, I got to hate it was too late, and now I'm, there's stuff going on someplace else, but I've got a sanctuary and a warm place, and there was also that, I've got John and Mary and Sanctuary, and I said, wait a minute, this is a religious song, but it's not. It's about a guy who's found peace someplace, and he's got a good, really warm feeling about it, and I said to myself, Jesus, this guy really feels good about himself. That's what I heard in that one song, that 2 or 3 albums, where it seemed to me you were sort of starting to come to peace with yourself and understanding where you were, and using the music to communicate that kind of emotion.
Yeah, I think everybody goes through something like that, but what that comes out of was, again, the 60s was a very, even for the country, it was a very restless time the country was going through, and it's like, what's that kid's name, the comedian, Robin Williams? Mm-hmm. He says, if you remember the 60s, you really weren't there. Well, I identify with that, because I was lost in the 60s. And I was living in a world that didn't make sense. And what happened, in 1968, I had tried so hard to overcome a drug problem I had that was very progressive and just got worse and worse in my life. And it just had me. And I tried different ways to overcome, the hospitals and talking to people, and nothing happened. I run into this guy who starts talking to me about God. And I didn't know God from a hole in the wall, man. So he's telling me about prayer. He says, God answers prayer. I'm going, anyway, that night, I get down on my knees. I said, God help me, just simple prayer. Here I am. I haven't had a drug or a drink since. What happened is, I think as a kid, man, I'm like everybody else. I thought success, fame, fortune, and romance, like the TV show. I thought, that's the formula, man. If I could be somebody, have enough bread in my pocket, man, have the right chick on my arm, get the right car, that whole thing, the money, the chick, the prestige, that was it. That was the formula. So here I am in the 60s, man. I make a couple of $1 million. I've traveled all over the world. I got 8 gold records. I'm like in the penthouse, and my wife is sitting here. We were like on the east side of Manhattan. I'm looking out the window. I'm empty. I'm saying, what is this? What's wrong? What's missing? So when I said this prayer in '68, I entered a world. We're talking about peace of mind. I entered a world that made sense that night, because the drugs and the alcohol, God just answered the prayer, took the compulsion and the obsession to do any of that stuff right out of me, and I entered into a world of that I never knew existed. It was, it gave me some peace, because I felt like I was taken care of. I was in good hands, and I still feel that way, and that's 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. But those songs, when I recorded Abraham, Martin, and John about 3 to 6 months after that, they were the first kind of maybe spiritual songs from a spiritual perspective, looking at a bad situation and getting something good out of it, not just letting it knock you down. You know, being touched by life, being affected by it, but not letting it knock you down, just learning something and getting up and moving on. So I started to come from this kind of place because I started feeling good. And that's basically the way I am today, you know. I just move through these things, thank God.
You're also able to go back, I mean, to get a little bit back to the music. You were at Laurie in the beginning, then you drifted away, went to Columbia, came back to Laurie, had another big hit. So you had a lot of anchors. You know, you had a lot of things. It seems like there's a lot of constancies in your life. You've been married to the same woman for a long time. I mean, you've always had the music.
Yeah. Well, there's people, you know, it's a strange thing, but guys like Dick Clark, who I met when I was in '58, has been a very consistent kind of friend through the years. He's been there. He's a very steady guy in a world that changes, and you see people dying around you all the time. It just, you know, it shakes you. It's especially when you're a kid and you say, what's this all about? So those kind of consistent. My wife Susan, definitely. I've known her since I was 14. I mean, we dated 8 years, and we've been married 25. So very consistent, you know, growing through a lot of things, and we have a great relationship. We're partners, we're friends, and it's like, it's not a surface relationship. We've been there for each other through the worst of times and through the best of times, so it's not like we expect, we could be ourselves with each other, you know?
You know,
Am I talking too much? I feel
it's your show. It's your show.
like so philosophical.
Takes it off our shoulders. I want about you're going to be performing your old music again now, or you are performing it again. Now there's a long gap of not doing it. Now Ricky Nelson went through this thing, or he made a song called Garden Party and said, "I don't want to sing those oldies again. You know, enough with that." Now you did the same thing effectively too, right? In the '70s, you didn't want to sing nothing, no Runaround Sue's, or
yeah. Well, you know what my thing was. Like I told you, like, it's funny. I grew up in this family where there's arguing all the time, right? So I pick up a guitar, I find the guitar, all of a sudden I'm singing something I'm feeling, I'm doing something, you know, I'm like into this expression. My father, my uncle, people started like, well, you should do it this way. Hey, don't fool with my music. This is mine. Leave, you know, I was mad.
Yeah.
Don't fool, hey, you want to yell, do anything you want, but it was like, don't step on my blue suede shoes. You could take my money, take my clothes, but don't fool with my music. And that's the way I always felt. It was always like a place, a sanctuary, a place where I could be honest. And so there's a lot of people who went strictly into show business or got terminally nostalgic. I never really got, to me, it was always a place of expressing yourself. I took it too serious.
well, you were anti-nostalgic. I mean, you wouldn't do the nostalgic stuff, right?
Yeah, well, I wanted to, it's always been a place where it's like I love singing, but it's got to be on my terms, or that, you know, it sounds selfish, but it's like I love taking people on a trip. I love singing for people. I mean, it's no good singing for the walls, believe me. I tried that. Because I love people and I love like making music for them, but it's got to, I didn't want to get stale with it and just give them something that was half-baked or like that would turn bitter. So for me, now I love doing the songs. I don't know why. Maybe they're so old they're new. Don't ask me, but to me, I could sing The Wanderer or Ruby Baby or Run Around. They're just as valid today, you know?
Let me sort of plug today indirectly. This is an album from 10 years ago, which has got, I know we really dig The Heart of a Saturday Night on this, which is a Tom Waits song on this live song album. This is '78, isn't it? Distributed by CBS. This is available in your cutout bins. But right now, you're recording for Arista Records, and you got one Tom Waits song on this album too, right?
Yeah.
It's San Diego Serenade. And who's producing this one?
Dave Edmonds. He's an English rocker. We're becoming fast friends here.
It's great, because Dion, let's see, you both did Born to Be With You. He did it on his Rock Pile album.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, if you have a copy of that, I'd like to hear that. He told me he did it. I never heard it.
He had a single of it, too.
He also did The Wanderer.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah, I
sure,
remember
recently.
that,
And,
man.
yeah.
You know, with all the saxes.
Yeah, right. Well,
So
yeah.
No, it seems like he has a good feel for it. It should be a good mesh.
And Arista's red hot right now, too. You come at the right time.
You could be the next Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of The Wanderer, Bill loves the movie The Wanderers, but I don't want to glorify these gangs you were around. I just want to get something straight. In the movie, there's something called the Baldies, which are big, fat guys with bald heads. Meanwhile, you say in the book it was a bunch of mooks that wanted to pattern themselves off the American Eagle, and they didn't have bald heads.
No, the kid who wrote The Wanderers wasn't from my neighborhood. He's a good writer.
Yeah.
But he used his imagination. It had nothing to do with...
But
Well, the
Bill,
Fordham, as a guy from Brooklyn,
Yeah.
the Fordham Baldies were like, my God, the Baldies are going to come down. They're going to rape our children and kill our grandmothers, and they were like the all-time bad gang.
but did you think they were bald?
Yes.
Yes.
We were told they were bald guys with sideburns. And what they did was they grabbed your girlfriends and they shaved their heads.
Yeah.
Not true.
But whatever they
Boy, I'm glad I came
we're not
today,
going to
though.
glorify these guys.
Wait,
We're just
I got to
talking
ask
about-
you. Give me
Susan's laughing.
I have to ask you for an Ernie Maresca story. Ernie
Ernie
Maresca.
Maresca.
A minute and a half
Here.
left,
Tell us
so,
about Ernie Maresca.
Yeah, first time I
Speaking
met
of The Wanderer.
Ernie Maresca, I've known the guy for years. He walks around this earth going, strange world, Dave. Strange world, Dave. First time I met Ernie Maresca is he walked up to me and he said, shoemaker, he ran out of his shop and he took a pair of rocking shoes, put them on his feet as he ran down the block. I guess you all heard the news, Here's where we meet, here's where we hear the beat, down at the corner of Rockin' Boulevard Street, My name's Ernie.
Sounds good.
I says, oh my God, who is this guy? I became like, I just hung out with him. We just liked writing, and so he was the first guy, like one of the first guys after I met. Well, that's another split. There wasn't many songwriters in my neighborhood, and he was a guy who put some words together.
You wrote my favorite line, Mary Jane, you give me a pain in the brain.
What song is that, Bill?
From Mary Jane, you give me a pain
By
in the
Ernie
brain,
Maresca?
by Ernie Maresca, yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming by and watching the show. I want to thank you very much for coming, Dion. And you got a new record coming out. We're looking forward to it on Arista.
Man, I want to ask Paul a few questions. Not if I sit down with this guy on...
The Wanderers. Available at all your bookstores all over the nation.
So go out and buy it.
Come, go dig it. Well, we can't say that. It's public access.
Oh,
buy it or don't
okay.
buy it. But we like it. So thanks a lot. And we're winding up right now. Good night. Maybe the theme song is ready.
She loves to watch. She loves to watch. She loves to watch.
As the house plays havoc, little girl's heart. She watching Mr. Silver Berkeley cause the clothes in the dark. Her others walk the front, who exercise. She looks through the window in the other girl's eyes. She loves to watch. She sometimes make herself known.
She loves to watch.
Yeah. Well, it really turns her on.
She loves to watch.
Well, it's more than fun. Just wanna